And the most extraordinary battle was in Stamford Bridge, which ironically was not the name of the bridge, but rather the name of the village that they fought in. Anyway, the fight was a losing battle for the Vikings. They retreated across a bridge, and one Viking remained, standing upon it wielding a Dane axe. The English tried to fight him, but every person on the front line was killed by the Viking. Every wave introduced more and more Englishmen fighting on the bridge, but the Viking with the Dane axe just continued to cut them down. 40 men attempted to cross the bridge, and 40 men failed. This random Viking was only stopped when an English soldier snuck underneath the bridge and stabbed him with a spear, which killed him. That Viking's death led to the invading force being routed and the English won, but their pride was heavily bruised. One guy killing 40 dudes, that's just embarrassing. This battle was especially amazing because it's remembered due to a fight on a bridge, but the village nearby was named Stamford Bridge. The two leaders were named Harold and Harold, and the lone Viking is called the Viking of Stamford Bridge, which really does not help with clarity, because is he the Viking of the bridge or the Viking of the town who died on a bridge in Stamford Bridge? But anyway, just something to think about. This whole Viking on the bridge thing is very similar to another story about a monk named Benkei. Benkei was a monk in the late 1180s, serving a samurai named Yoshitsune. There's a whole veritable feast of history between these two, but in Benkei's final moments, much like the Viking in Stamford 100 years earlier, it took place on a bridge. Yoshitsune was retreating to his castle to commit seppuku, and he needed time. So Benkei bought him that time by guarding the bridge as hundreds of samurai approached. The story goes that Benkei remained on the bridge with his Nagakiba at the ready. Wave after wave of samurai charged against him. Legend has it that he killed 500 samurai before they decided to just shoot Benkei with arrows. Yeah, these old last stands are always really embellished. But anyway, after however many samurai actually died, they decided to be cautious and to shoot arrows at Benkei instead. Benkei remained standing despite being a pincushion of arrows, so the samurai didn't approach anymore. Eventually, after some waiting, they did approach the bridge to see that he had propped himself up on his weapon and was long dead, which brought Yoshitsune enough time to commit seppuku, so W friend, I guess. This next one's a fun one. We're going to need to go back over 1,000 years before Benkei and the Viking of Stamford Bridge. Agis III. Agis III was the son of the king of Sparta, Archimedes III, and he'd witnessed Sparta's decline in both power and social standing. Agis' father left Greece to fight against Macedonia, which was Alexander the Great's kingdom, along with fighting a few other Greek city-states. Archimedes did this after he and Agis fought off the Thebans just a decade earlier in some weird father-son bonding experience in which they tried to regain Sparta's lost land. Anyway, all that aside, but then Archimedes did the dad thing, and he went off on his own to find the illustrious pack of cigarettes, which means he became a mercenary commander, and when he saw the size difference between his army and the Macedonians, he dipped out, saying something like, "You guys got this, I gotta go grab a drink, be right back." And then he just vanished. We find out later that he was killed the same day when he was caught in another battle. Anyway, so Agis had been holding down the house, keeping it tidy for when his dad came back with the cigarettes that he'd promised, but instead he got a knock on the door. It was a messenger, telling him that his father passed away in a tragic cigarette-related four-car pileup, and now he owned the house and had to pay taxes. I don't think this bit's making any sense. Okay, wait, scratch all of that. Okay, anyway, Agis was king and Archidamus was dead. That's all you need to know. And so Sparta's land was divided up to its neighbors and enemies. Agis knew that it would take time for Sparta to recover, so he bided his time and waited for Macedonia to drop its guard. He sent out messengers to speak with various Persian military leaders, contractors, and even the king himself, asking for military supplies and asking them to attack Greece. The Persians did not need to be asked twice, and so they did, which marked the beginnings of a new war against Macedonia. 2 years later, Agis and some other Greek kingdoms who were opposed to Macedonian rule declared war against Alexander's kingdom, which is Macedonia. And after a successful battle, Agis moved forward to siege the great city of Megalopolis, which is where Agis made his last stand. Unfortunately for Agis, the city held against the siege, and a relief army made its way to battle Agis. The battle was lost, and he was wounded. While he and his men were retreating and they were carrying him, he realized he was dead weight, and so he told his men to leave him and retreat faster. Staying behind, unable to stand, he fought on his knees and killed a few of the approaching Macedonians. Eventually, he was killed by a javelin. And like so many other stories of last stands, his life was cut short by a sneak attack or a thing he couldn't reasonably defend himself from. You'd be surprised how many last stand stories end that way, at least in the ancient world. Okay, now we're talking about Roy Benavides. So this man was a staff sergeant in the Vietnam War, and he has a really cool story. But to keep it simple, this guy was made of tough stuff. He was undercover and he stepped on a landmine, and then he got rescued and sent to a hospital where he would, against doctor's orders, crawl across the ground and try to lift himself up against a wall. And he just did that until he could walk again. Yeah, this guy just speedran recovery so he could get back to Vietnam. 2 years later, now in 1968, Roy was in a forward operating base in Loc Ninh. Recently, a 12-man Special Forces recon team was dropped into a jungle west of the Loc Ninh area. They were pinned down and needed extraction, but the helicopters weren't able to land due to the hail of gunfire being laid down on them. And so Roy hears this distress call over the radio, and he saw the helicopters landing at the base to refuel, so he immediately volunteers to go help in a second extraction attempt. The 12-man team was either dead or wounded, and they needed help fast. Keep in mind that Roy was also part of this battle. So Roy got into the helicopter and they flew over. When they got to the 12-man team, the helicopter got as close as it could, and Roy jumped out and sprinted to the team. While doing so, he took a bullet to his right leg and a bullet hit his helmet. Upon reaching the group of injured soldiers, he proactively took charge and helped to pinpoint where the team should focus their gunfire. He then threw a few smoke grenades to alert the helicopter of his and the rest of the team's position. He shot some suppressing fire at the enemies while the other guys extracted, and he then searched for and found the dead squad leader's body and classified documents on it, which would not have been good if they fell into enemy hands. As he was carrying the body to safety, he was shot in the abdomen, and a grenade exploded, sending shrapnel into his back. While that was happening, he also saw the helicopter pilot get shot and crash with everyone inside. So immediately he secured the documents and sprinted to the downed helicopter and pulled people out of the wreckage to create defensive perimeter, entrenching everyone in a safer but unsustainable defensive position. And so while the enemy fired upon the group, Roy was making sure everyone was holding up as he called in airstrikes to make another extraction attempt possible. But as he was doing that, another few bullets hit him in the thigh while he was fixing up the injuries of another team member. But that did not stop him. Just as the new extraction helicopter landed, Roy, one by one, carried the injured soldiers to the aircraft. He did it in multiple trips, and his second trip had him ambushed by an enemy soldier who he fought and killed with a knife, but not before sustaining a bayonet wound or two. Just as we go along, keep track of his injuries in your head. He's been shot a few times, stabbed a few times, and he's got some shrapnel in him. As he carried the last of the men to the helicopter, he saw 2 men approaching, and so he killed them before checking to see if all classified information and injured people were collected. And then he passed out from the pain and was dragged onto the helicopter. He managed to save 8 men after sustaining 37 bullet, shrapnel, and bayonet wounds. He was so exhausted and bloody that his eyes had fused shut. He was presumed dead, but as the doctor was zipping the body bag, he spat into the doctor's face to prove he was still alive. What a goddamn legend. These stories are just so unreal. In fact, when Roy received his Medal of Honor, Ronald Reagan even said that if it were a movie, I would not believe it. Which just shows how nuts life can get, especially in do-or-die situations. Anyway, subscribe, and YouTube thinks that you'll like this video next, so click on it.